One Pacific greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Pacific Tourism Organization's webinar on using digital identity and document verification to reopen the local economy and tourism industry. I am Atama Tamanlo, and I am the Digital Marketing Officer here at the Pacific Tourism Organization, and I'll be your host for today. I'd like to touch on a few logistical points. Please note that this meeting, this session is recorded, and this is to have a recording available for those who need it after the webinar. And also, please note all participants are muted during the webinar. So if you have any questions or comments, please do make use of the chat feature or the chat box and send them through. We will have introductions in the beginning, then we'll continue with the presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A to round up the session for today. We are very delighted to have us here, Tim and Jonathan from ShareRing. So without further delay, I'd like to hand over to Jonathan to make the introductions and begin with their presentation. Thank you.
It's great. So thank you, obviously, everybody, for joining us. Just between Tim and myself, we've got a 14-hour time gap. So I think we've got morning, evening, and evening, morning, afternoon, evening with everybody. So again, it's great to have everybody here. What we're going to talk about today, and Tim, if you can just drop onto the next slide, is we're going to give you an overview of parts of the business. We're going to give ourselves, going to give ourselves an overview of a business to everybody as to what we do, where we're based, and some of our core. Can we mute everybody? So yes, we're going to talk about the business. We're going to give you an overview of the key individuals within the business, as well as what we do. I'm then going to pass over to Tim, who's going to give you a more detailed explanation of the different technologies and solutions that we have. And then obviously at the end, we'll come back with a Q&A to talk about some specific questions that people may have. So Tim, thanks. So to introduce ShareRing, we're a business that established in 2018, obviously a technology business. We've got staff distributed in 10 countries, 5 regions around the world. As I said, we cover pretty much every time zone ourselves, let alone then adding in the various customers and clients that we're dealing with. The goal for ShareRing is to make sure that we provide individuals and organizations elegant solutions to today's global challenges around the creation, management, and use of personal identity. We are a blockchain business, and we use blockchain to create the solutions and create some of the fundamental benefits of what we do. And that is included within security, transparency, and providing a highly flexible environment for the issuance, storage, and verification of that personal information. What we've created is the ShareRing Vault, which has been built on 2 fundamental principles, which is privacy by design and interoperability. And as I mentioned before, our core values include security, transparency, flexibility, and then privacy, which for our users is integral to our platform and for the success of the ecosystem entirely. In terms of what we've been doing and the groups that we've been participating in, there's a list here. So the ID 2020 working group, the Good Health Pass, and the PSN. The Good Health Pass is the one that I'll highlight today, which Tim and another colleague of ours, Daryl, have been actively involved in 2 of the working groups there. And so the Good Health Pass is about setting out globally agreed standards within the identity sector, and specifically around the use of health information. ID 2020 was originally set up for giving digital identity to people around the world that don't have identity, and we're very proud to be part of those 2 alongside the BSN, which is the Blockchain Services Network. Underneath, there's just a brief overview of some of the press coverage that we've had over the last couple of weeks and months, and a large portion of that is here in the Caribbean, where I'm based at the moment, because of the activity that we've been doing. I mentioned briefly in terms of the team size, but I think this is a graphic gives you a very good indication of our spread around the world. So as I said, we're based out of 10 different countries. We cover pretty much every time zone that's possible. We have a development team, which is the largest portion of our business, which is obviously what you would expect. We have an in-house team in blockchain, mobile app, API, UI, UX, and BA and back-end skills. Between the customer support and operations, again, that is spread globally. So we have a skill set that can be able to deploy in any kind of time frame. And again, just on the bottom right, there's obviously a list of the various different countries where we are based. So this is a key slide for us, and this is our long-term vision and our long-term strategy of where we are aiming. So we are aiming to have one app with endless possibilities. And we're aiming to have the most complete blockchain-based ecosystem for accessing and buying goods and services worldwide. If you look at the image on the left, we've obviously identified a number of industries that we are targeting. We are already in either proof of concepts, pilots, or towards the end of those in a number of industries. And on top of that, we've got plans in terms of what we're building out to access and to target additional ones. What we're going to talk about today, and what I'll pass over to Tim, is the technology that underpins everything that we do, what the USPs are and what makes us unique, and why we picked out that technology, and then some of the specific solutions that we've been doing. With myself being based here in the Caribbean, when we go on to talk about those solutions, I'll actually be able to give you some examples of what we've been doing here. Obviously, the similarity between the Caribbean and the South Pacific indicates that a lot of what we've been picking up and learning here should be applicable to what you guys are experiencing down in the South Pacific as well. So, Tim, I'll just pass over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology that underpins what we do, and then we'll sort of talk a little bit about the solutions and how it's being used in the real world at the moment. What we've developed is effectively the world's first platform and ecosystem that allows you to store verifiable documents within your mobile phone. So we've all heard of things like digital identity and things like that, where people can store their identity in their phone. But what we've done is actually taken it quite a lot further, and we've created something called the ShareRing Vault. So what the ShareRing Vault allows you to do is store information that could be such as your identity, so passport, national ID card, driver's license, but you can also store additional information or verifiable documents in there, such as vaccine certificates, test results. It could be graduation certificates, insurance, tickets for an event using our NFT technology. It could be visa information or anything like that. So what we do as part of that process is allow you to store that and then seamlessly provide that to organizations that might require it. So we'll talk a little bit more about the solutions, about how that works. One of the things that actually are quite important about this is because of the decentralized nature of the technology, what it actually means is that it's very, very easy to use in regions or areas where they're just entering sort of their targets for digitalization of their technology. So they might have a low infrastructure, low mobile service, not much sort of cloud infrastructure or back-end infrastructure or things like that. So this solution actually supports that very, very well. And it's very easy to roll out and start using without too much integration or any sort of real additional infrastructure in those regions. So Jonathan will talk a little bit later about how we're doing some of that in the Caribbean and some of the challenges we might have faced doing that as well in some of the pilots that we're doing. So some of the key features of the ShareRing app ecosystem and ShareRing Vault, it's self-sovereign. So what that basically means is when someone signs up for the app, ShareRing as a company, we don't receive information about that user. So that means when they create their identity, when they load their insurance docs, when they load their travel information, event tickets, or health certificates, that information is not stored on ShareRing servers. What happens is that information stays on your phone within the app inside something called the ShareRing Vault. And the information, we do what's called a digital hash of that information, and that digital hash is stored on the blockchain. So the blockchain is a public utility that anyone can view, but the information on that blockchain does not relate back to who you are or anything like that. It's just what they call a digital hash, like a digital fingerprint of that document. It's self-sovereign, as I said, so you have complete control. So our users have 100% complete control of the information that they're storing within their vault and who actually receives access to it. All of the data is watermarked, so that gives a few benefits. One is when the document's created, a watermark's put on that, so that helps us verify that the document hasn't been altered or changed. But the other thing is when, say, for example, say you send the passport information to a hotel, that information is watermarked with the hotel's details. And that means if anyone ever manages to get access to that passport information, we can always trace it back and find out where the leak or the hack was. So it actually reduces what's called the attack vectors of the information source, or the ability to get that information. We incorporate biometrics into this. So what that means is that when someone signs up for our service, we do a liveness detection, like a face match, a match on the ID card. And it means that they can securely sign up without having to go into an office or show their passport to anyone. They can do it all on the phone, and we have very high, almost sort of 100% guarantee that the person that signed up for it is the one that's actually going to be using it. So in terms of the life cycle, so this is getting into a little bit sort of technical. I can go much deeper, but I won't. So there's effectively 4 actors in the life cycle of a document. So in the middle, we've got the holder. So that's the person that has the app on their phone. On the left, we have the issuer. So that might be a passport issuer. It could be a health centre that's issuing a health credentials or a health document. It could be an insurance company, any organisation that's basically issuing information or a document that goes into the vault. So, and it could be an education provider for a graduation certificate or something like that. At the bottom, we have the blockchain. So basically what happens is when the issuer issues a document to the holder, we do a fingerprint of that information and store the fingerprint on the blockchain. And then the document goes into the vault of the holder, the ShareRing vault. When the holder decides to use it somewhere, so they're entering a restaurant or going to events to use tickets or something like that, that information is securely sent to the verifier, which is actually the event center or the restaurant or the bar or the hotel or something like that. So they'll receive the information and then confirm on the blockchain that that information is valid and it hasn't been fraudulently created or changed since its creation. So the process is actually very, very seamless. It's very, very fast as well in terms of the ability to use it and the speed of the transactions. So a little bit more information about this. So in terms of the issuer, as I said before, we use the blockchain technology. Now, for those of you that don't know, blockchain basically creates a distributed set of machines around the world that actually store immutable data on them. So immutable basically means that the data can't be changed. So that's why we store a digital hash or a fingerprint of the information that's actually stored on that blockchain. So at the point of issuance, that document is fingerprinted, and then that information stored on the blockchain from the issuer. And then, as I said before, we create watermarking or do watermarking on that document too. So the ShareRing Vault is basically the name that we've given to, effectively it's a file or a container that sits on your phone. So it could be an Android phone or an iPhone, any type of smartphone basically. And that vault contains all of your information that's securely in there. So one of the things about that vault is a user can back it up to their Google Drive, their iCloud, or say their if they're using some other cloud service, they can back that information up. That's encrypted with their private key. So that basically means that only they have access to it. So even if someone gets access to their phone, if they get access to their Google Drive or something like that, that file, the vault, is actually pointedly useless for them because they can't access that information. So it requires biometrics like a thumbprint to be able to unlock it and use the documents within it. So it's extremely secure. And then on the document verification side, so one of the things when we send a document to a venue or something like that, then it's checked on the blockchain to make sure that it's valid. And then we also add a watermark with the venue's details on it to make sure that we protect that document against leaking, against anyone else managing to gain access to it. So for one of the values, or one of our core values, is basically security of information. So we basically make sure that all of the information is always secure, and the privacy is sort of the #1 thing for the users. So they actually get to determine who has access to their data, unlike a lot of other services where they have a centralized solution where data is stored centrally on their servers. And the other thing about the solution is it's extremely versatile. So yeah, we'll give some examples today of some of the solutions that work within it, but it's actually, we've only just begun in terms of what you can do with this system and what type of solutions it will be available for in the future as well. So the app is very, very user-friendly. So basically you've got, this is the menu screen. So you've got the home that allows you to access all of our services, including things like the health, the travel, accommodation bookings, e-commerce, if people do shopping and things like that, the identity, so eKYC for the financial areas. We utilize QR code technology quite extensively as part of this. So when someone's entering, say, an event or a restaurant, they'll either scan a QR code at the entrance or that event holder will scan your QR code to suck in the information to guarantee that they know who's entering. There's help, so we do live help, so they can people can text information to see what whether if they need help for anything. We've got the sharing vault. We've got the wallet that allows you to do some e-commerce functions that we're adding to the system, so payments, currency selection, and things like that. And then obviously the booking engine as well for our accommodation booking and other services that we'll talk about shortly. So I'll talk a little bit about the solution. So some of the real life examples of what we're doing in the industry. So the first thing I'll talk about is ShareRingʻs. So this is obviously quite a hot topic at the moment in a lot of locations. So one of the things that's quite important for organizations is that they can receive things like test results or vaccine results. But the ShareRingʻs solution goes a lot beyond that. So we're not limiting our technology to COVID related things. So it could be vaccination certificates for anything that might be required to go somewhere or enter a certain location. So one of the things about the ShareRingʻs solution is that what we do is we receive verified information from either a health professional, a Ministry of Health, or you can do something that's called a ShareRing certified document. And what that would basically mean is if you have, for example, a health certificate from, let's say you've got it from Hong Kong, someone's traveling from Hong Kong, they all have a QR code on them, and we can read the QR code with our app and then verify that that document is genuine and then pull that information into the ShareRing vault. So that means that the ShareRing vault would then have their vaccination certificate, and you could use that for entering countries, you could use it for entering venues, hotels, events, or things like that. So we do the fingerprinting on that, which basically means that someone can't then create a fraudulent health certificate and change information on it to pretend that they've been vaccinated or something like that when they enter a venue. And so we get basically the system itself guarantees against any tampering that's associated with that. Jonathan, why don't you talk a little bit about some things that we're doing with ShareRingʻs in the Caribbean at the moment?
Yeah, so the last event that we did the weekend before last, we had a Ministry of Health representative that was down there, and we're looking to then continue those conversations to assist their existing systems. So I think one of the key things that we'll cover a little bit later is that we have the ability to sit over the top of all existing systems. You don't have to replace systems to be able to benefit from what we do. So that makes the integration part of it exceptionally quite straightforward. So we're ongoing conversations with the Ministry of Health here in particular. On top of that, we've got a number of private health centres that are talking to us, and as Tim mentioned, not just about the immediate concern, but actually looking at the longer term benefits of having the health information in a verified format. And that includes prescription use or misuse, and limiting the misuse of that, health history, health data, your past surgeries, your what's the word for when you're allergic? So allergies, various things like that, blood type, all of those kind of things. So we're talking to 2 or 3 different health providers in this region. And we've also got 2 others in 2 other countries around the world that have also approached us for the longer term. So we're working with them to build it out. Initially, right now, we are using obviously COVID to assist the reopening because of the current pandemic. But that is a short-term viewpoint in terms of where we're heading.
I think one of the important things about this as well is the portability of the data. So, for example, someone in Taiwan might basically go to the hospital and they've got their health data that's stored in their vault, and then they go to, say, Thailand, and they might need to go to a hospital there, for example. Then they can simply scan a QR code at that hospital, and that hospital can receive all of the important health information, such as allergy information and things like that. So, you know, that's how broad the solution can be. And as Jonathan said, we are talking to or have been approached by a number of organisations that are very interested in leveraging that technology in their existing systems. So I'll talk a little bit about sharing access. So this is one that seems to have gained quite a lot of traction in a number of areas, and I guess it's a multifaceted solution. So at its core, this basically is allowing people to access a location. So, for example, if I need to go to, or I want to go to a bar, and that bar requires me to prove my age to show that I'm over 18 or whatever the legal drinking age is, then what I would simply do is go to that bar, scan a QR code using the ShareRing app. It would provide the information to the bar, such as the proof that I'm 18, proof of my ID, and things like that. One of the key things about this is that because the bar only requires that just as evidence for me to go in, that information isn't kept by the bar at all. So it proves that I'm over 18. It verifies that just simply scanning the QR code and going in, but the bar doesn't necessarily need to keep that information. So we call that sort of information that's in transit. There's no database that it gets stored in. But maybe that bar also needs to do some sort of contact tracing. So maybe they only need to keep the email address, for example. So we allow for that. So you'll get a warning saying this bar is keeping your name and email address, but they also need to verify your age, for example, and then they'll let you in. We're also using it for events. So it might be ticketed events where you need to basically prove that you've got a ticket for that event, prove who you are, prove that maybe you've been vaccinated, for example, and then you gain entry. So the process is really quite straightforward. So you sign up, verify the information. As with all of it, it's stored in the ShareRing vault, scan your QR code, and then gain entry. So what I'll do is show a quick video and then ask Jonathan to talk a little bit about some things that we're doing in the region.
ShareRing makes it easy for anyone with a mobile device to access an event. It proves the user's health status in a private yet trusted way with digital ID verification, vaccine certificate, or health test result. Sign up is fast and easy. Set up takes minutes. First, users will set their PIN and copy their account recovery phrase. Next, optical character recognition, OCR, populates the user's information automatically from a scan of their documents. They then take a short selfie video, which by applying liveness detection and facial recognition technologies, ShareRing matches to the scanned documents. After the user confirms all information is correct, they verify their email and simply click Backup. It's all set. Once a vaccine or test certificate has been added to their personal information vault on the app, a user can go straight to the event with just their tickets and phone. Our ID app means they can skip the long lines by using the ShareRing Express Lane. A QR code will be presented at the entrance for them to scan. Users simply open the ShareRing app and use their phone to scan the venue's QR code. They will always be asked for their approval before the encrypted and watermarked copy of their ID and vaccine or test certificates is sent from their device to the venue staff's device. Before they can enter, the staff will conduct various checks against the information received. Staff can cross-reference the name on the ID to the vaccine certificate and check that the photo ID matches the person in front of them. Then with their ticket, they're all set to enter. ShareRing, unlock the world with our contactless solution for events.
Great. So Jonathan, why don't you talk quickly about some things that we're doing in your region?
Yeah, I mean, the video is actually a perfect example of what we've been doing. And again, I mentioned the event last weekend, and we use exactly that. So here in Barbados, every venue needs to record a name, email address, and a temperature. And we are just assisting them with digitizing that process. And then they are able to keep that for the required amount of time before they then purge that information. That is then given, as Tim mentioned before, expressly with the user's permission. So if they want to come into that venue, and we did a music event in essence the weekend before last, where there were 17 different acts that were playing and about 150 or so guests. And out of that, we did both guests and the staff in terms of people that were going through the system. And we were able to tie health information as well to the performers. And then for the guests attending, it was just registration only, as we would call it. And then we've got another event coming up this weekend, which is going to use exactly the same kind of process. What we're looking at as the next step is then adding in the likes of a membership. Instead of it just being a public event, it might be a sports club, or it might be a venue with a ticket, for example, as Tim again mentioned. So they're some of the next rollouts that we're looking to build, and that's happening both here and elsewhere around the world. And then once you're actually in that venue and then everything else with that access solution, we've also got the ability to then activate that particular event through the app as well, through the NFTs and some of the other functionalities. So the access solution is definitely one that's picked up the most traction. We're getting about 2 to 3 inquiries per day at the moment. And then off the back of that, we're obviously working on which ones are within the scope of doing it, and where we've got the required teams to roll that out. So we're being quite strategic, but as Tim mentioned, it's getting some really good traction.
Thank you. I guess another quite important thing about this is the music event that Jonathan was talking about last week was, very, very spotty or bad mobile service access and things like that. So our solution does support areas where the infrastructure might not be sort of quite up to speed, where you have large groups of people that may not be able to have good access to cellular infrastructure too.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is
anyone with a mobile.
Yep.
Yeah, we've improved the process from the first events that we did. There's been some improvement in the speed with which that information is transferred as well. So larger events with tens of and hundreds of thousands of people, which is where we're going to be ending up before too long. Well, hopefully, they will be significantly quicker in terms of that process. So again, there's been some really good learnings that have picked up off the back of the events that we've been doing, so that the product itself is becoming exceptionally accurate for what we need it for.
Thank you. So let's move on to the sharing travel solution. So one of the things that we've added to the app, or actually are releasing shortly, it's moving into our test environment very, very soon, is the ability for people to book accommodation through the app. So what we offer is, I guess, one of the most seamless and fastest methods to book accommodation. So basically the user simply goes in, they search for a location, as you do with most accommodation platforms, do all of the filters that they want to do, select the hotel that they want to stay at, and then it's a one-click booking process. So we allow one-click booking because the information is actually stored in their ShareRing vault as that's required for their booking. So it might be obviously their name, their address, their phone number, email address, and any other information that's required for the booking. But we've taken it one step further. So the other thing we are offering to select hotels that join our program is the ability to do something called express check-in. So express check-in actually allows a user or a customer to check into a hotel before they arrive at the hotel. So let's say that their flight lands in Fiji, they get off the flight, they open their phone, they're reminded about the hotel booking, they tap check-in, They verify the information, such as the name, the passport, and any dependents that may be staying with them. And then the required information is securely sent to the hotel. That means that when they arrive at the hotel, they don't have to queue up at rush hour at, say, 2 p.m. During the day with all the other 20, 30, 40 people that are waiting in the queue at the hotel. They can simply go to the hotel, grab their room key, go straight to their room, check in and relax. The benefits for the user or the traveller are quite obvious. It's a faster and more seamless process. They get to their room a lot faster. I know one of the most stressful experiences of travelling is the check-in process and waiting in line when you're exhausted after a long flight. The other benefits for the hotel, though, are that you don't have a large number of people milling at the entrance. You don't have the reception or the check-in staff actually overwhelmed by the number of people coming in at the same time. And it also supports a contactless check-in process. So that means with less people in reception and that just grab your key and go straight to your room, you're not worried about contact and things like that, especially in the times of COVID. So it's a process that we've spent a long time working on. We're very, very proud of. And we are in the process of speaking to a number of hotels, boutique hotels, and also hotel chains about incorporating the system with their existing processes. In terms of sharing travel, is there anything you wanted to add to that, Jonathan?
I was just going to say, I think it's not just hotels. The actual entire industry can benefit, from some of the access stuff that we've been talking about, and obviously with health as it is at the moment with COVID. Which is why we kind of covered those two initially. The other benefits that this can work for car rentals, this can work for activity booking. So one of my favorite examples that I always use is you could have your PADI certificate being added in. You then book your dive, with an accredited one. They can then actually cross-reference that your certificate is genuine, that you have passed the required levels to go down to a certain depth. And you can then obviously book that activity again and do all of that all in one app. So that's where we go back to that kind of one app, endless possibilities. And you've got that trust of the information that's been sent throughout the entire journey. So obviously that's what we're working towards. That's what we're building with. And as I say, there's just lots of use cases. And I think the travel industry is one industry that really has almost endless number of use cases, and almost any business that sits within that travel industry sees some real benefit from what we can offer through what we've already been showing, and some of the other stuff that we're looking to build and are already building in the background as well.
Great. So the final thing I'll talk about is the eKYC solution. So this is sort of a little bit off the travel and access, and more focused on financial institutions and insurance, but we are doing quite a lot in this area. I guess we've spoken about identity and presenting that information through the ShareRing Vault, but KYC stands for Know Your Customer. So banks, insurance companies, any types of organizations like that, they're required to store and receive a lot of information about you, such as verification of your address. So it might be a guaranteed verification of your address in the last sort of 3 years or 5 years or something like that. Obviously, identity, credit could be credit rating or things like that. So we support the ability through our eKYC solution for basically a bank or a financial institution to receive all of that information, but it's also stored in your vault. Now, one of the huge benefits about that is with some of the pilots that we're doing now, for example, I might load my identity, so they might need 2 forms of ID minimum. They might require a proof of address or a utility bill or something like that. So in Australia, we call this 100 points of ID. So once I've got 100 points of ID, I can submit that, go either online with the credit union or bank, or go to the bank and scan my ID. They would then receive that information and then they verify it visually. So they would actually double verify that information. And once they've double verified it, that verification will be stored in your vault. So that means that your identity information is actually that much stronger. So we create a strength, effectively a strength rating or something for the identity. And that means because it's been verified by a financial institution, you actually have a stronger ID, so that when you use it in other places, maybe signing up for another bank or insurance or something like that, they may automatically accept that because this bank has already authorized it and viewed it. In future, we could do things like store credit ratings and credit checks, credit history, that sort of information as well. So we can take it a lot further than that. Jonathan, why don't you talk about something that we're doing specifically in your region? You're muted.
That helps. I was just checking the time actually, just to make sure we give enough time for a Q&A. But yeah, so briefly, we're working with a credit union actively, and we're just coming to the end of that pilot with them. We've got ongoing conversations with additional credit unions and insurance companies. So I think within the travel industry, the insurance companies are maybe the first beneficiaries of this. So either issuing travel insurance or and obviously some governments are almost mandating that travel insurance and health insurance needs to be in place before they'll let you into certain countries. So I think there are some benefits within the travel industry specifically around that. And I think just because of the time, we'll jump on to some of the remaining slides and just summarize and then go to the Q&A, I think.
Great. So over to you for the summary.
Yeah, so hopefully, if we've done the presentation well, these three themes have come across in almost everything that we do and what we've been talking about. And we use the blockchain technology to provide an efficient and highly secure contactless solution. That's in obviously tying identity and verification and tying the two of them together to give somebody access to obviously various services around the world. The actual integration, as I mentioned earlier, is very easy and is very non-intrusive. We sit and work on top of existing businesses and their processes and their systems. We don't have to go in and rewrite the whole system. We've been talking to governments, we've been talking to regional bodies about how we can integrate with their existing systems. There's obviously complexity that sits with all of that different architecture that's in place. We're actually able to come in and give them the ability to either rebuild it or change it or improve it at their own speed, because we've got that one size that fits all. And then just at last, it's probably our most important belief, which is that the user has complete control, and the user is at the center of everything and the holder of that information. So that goes back to that self-sovereign identity and making sure that anything and any information that they either receive or that they send out, that they've given prior permission to do that. So we're inherently compliant with the likes of GDPR and all the other data protection regulations around the world with that. So those are the three core things that I would say are kind of our key USPs and some of the stuff that stand us apart. And I think it'd be good to hear if there are any questions or queries off the back of that.
I'll skip that. I'll leave that up there. So while we take any questions. So I guess, Atama, I'll throw back to you in terms of the process for taking questions.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, for that, and thank you, Tim. I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much, Tim and Jonathan, for the presentation and the answers to the questions for today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this call. This is, like I mentioned earlier, this is recording and will be shared through YouTube and also on our newsletter. And we're looking forward to seeing you next time. Stay safe and thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks everyone for attending. It's great to see you all here.